The benefit queen in Ukraine, also known as Volodymyr Zelensky, is once again gaslighting America into continuing its funding for this proxy war between Ukraine and Russia. Now, I recently reposted a video on Twitter of Zelensky with the caption, quote, "The US will have to send their sons and daughters to fight, and they will be dying," end quote. Straight out of Saint Zelensky's mouth, the president of the bastion of democracy, that is, Ukraine. Now, I still stand by this tweet, but apparently I didn't address this context issue of the clip. And according to some, I framed it wrong. Even when I added a bit more context, that was still not enough. So let's run the full clip before we get started.
And I'm actually very happy that we have bipartisan support, but we keep hearing those messages from time to time, and they're dangerous. There are political leaders that are elected by people, and if this issue is raised, those political leaders need to be responsible and cautious because people are looking at them. Who wants a third world war? Would anyone Would anyone be willing to accept that risk? The U.S. is never going to give up on the NATO member states. If it happens so that Ukraine, due to various opinions and weakening and depleting of assistance, loses, Russia is going to enter Baltic states, NATO member states, and then the U.S. will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying, God forbid, because it's a horrible thing.
Absolutely astonishing. Now, joining me to unpack this today is Addison Smith, host of In Focus with Addison Smith on One America News Network. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you, Addison. I guess the first question, and it sounds like a bit of a silly question, but I've got to know, what was your initial reaction to that clip of Volodymyr Zelensky?
Yeah, well, the clip that really got spread around on Twitter, online, was the short 19-second clip of him saying exactly what he said, that the United States is going to have to send their sons and daughters to fight a war if Russia goes after NATO allies. And the first thing I thought was something similar to probably what you thought, Lewis, is why is everyone saying that this is a deceptive editing, a dishonest clip? When you watch the full minute and a half version of it, if anything, it just makes it sound worse because his entire argument for this whole war is flawed. His argument that Russia is going to go after NATO allies. How do you know this? Why do you know this? What evidence do you have of that? Is your word justification enough for us to have to send hundreds of billions of dollars funding a proxy war? So my initial reaction is to that and to the whole thing writ large is just it's all really based on flawed thinking, and the so-called context doesn't make it any better.
Absolutely. Well, I can't speak on behalf of Americans because, as you know, I'm British. But our country's putting regimes aside, the Biden administration and, of course, the Sunak administration. We have a strong, positive relationship between each other and a strong connection with one another. But I have a hunch, right, that I think more and more Americans are waking up about the military-industrial complex. I think they're waking up to the idea that fighting for my country is actually now just for globalist interests. I mean, do you think that I'm wrong with that? Do you think that message is sort of spreading with America? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're totally right. This is something that's happened within the last several years. And you hear this phrase in America, the new right, the rise of the new right, which is really just a more populist conservative movement that is growing. You know, back in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, it was people on the left who are complaining about the military-industrial complex and no more endless wars, and we want to be isolationists. We don't want to be imperializing every country in the world. Now that argument is coming from the right and people, I think, on the far left. It's kind of come full circle. It's two things that both sides of the aisle are actually linking arms over: the far left and people who are just everyday conservative, freedom-loving Americans. And then of course you have the establishment Democrats who all of a sudden have become pro-war, pro-proxy war, funding these endless battles overseas and just having this insatiable bloodlust for international conflict. That is now the establishment Democrat position.
It's just fascinates me because you're seeing neocons and Democrats getting together and literally having this pact where they're sending billions and billions to a proxy war, all for globalist interests. It's got nothing to do with. It's about regime changes, and we've seen this like over the years. I mean, it's actually quite nice to see that a lot of sides now are going, do you know what? We've got to end this war. We've got to do peace talks. We've got to have de-escalation.
Yeah, this is really busted the door wide open. It's not popular in America. If you took any survey today, it is not popular for Americans in this country sending hundreds of billions of dollars funding a forever war. The American people just aren't for something like that. They're trying to hold elected officials accountable here, but you have even the AOC types who are purportedly farther left, who are saying we have to support Ukraine no matter whatever it takes. And members of her own party, people who have voted for AOC, are calling her out on it, are turning on her. So I totally agree. I really think the tide has been turning, and we're seeing a lot of positive developments of people waking up and realizing these wars are nothing more than global power grabs. This is not about defending each other's countries or defending America. Funding Ukraine is not America first, despite what people like Nikki Haley try to say with their twisted mental gymnastics. It's not about that, and I think the people really are starting to catch on.
I guess my last question. In your opinion, do you see any forms of de-escalation and peace talks by the United States, or is that just for the birds?
Well, de-escalation, Russia offered to have negotiations with Zelensky early on. Zelensky explicitly denied. He turned this down. I don't see de-escalation happening thanks to the current regime here in America, the Biden administration. I think it will have to be regime change in America before there's de-escalation in Ukraine. As much as I hate to say it, because at every step of the way, at every turn, Joe Biden has, if anything, made this worse. You hear them saying we have to fund Ukraine to keep fend off Russian aggression. I think funding Ukraine is making Russia more and more aggressive, and especially against the United States. So I don't see how Joe Biden is going to come out of this de-escalating and with a good look on the United States on the world stage. I don't see it. So I'm very much looking forward to 2024 when we can have the opportunity to kick Joe Biden out of office, Lord willing, if there's if our vote actually counts. Kick Joe Biden out of office and put someone in office who is going to call for de-escalation, someone who's not going to be putting us on the verge of World War III.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm completely with you, Addison. Addison Smith, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll speak again to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. It was a pleasure.